Hi there. We have another seminar here, our video demonstration of some features in the Sirius Astrology software, but I'm actually going to only show you Sirius towards the end of this demonstration. First, I want to explain some ideas behind what I'll show you. I'm going to show you planetary patterns that are amazingly powerful and very fascinating. And these are patterns that you can use in forecasting, for example, and that's where I'll show you how they can be used. These are new ideas. You probably have not heard much about this. I mean, nothing's completely new, but let's just say they're ideas that are not commonly used. So I think you'll find this very interesting no matter what level of astrology you are at or what your involvement with astrology is. Okay, well, first thing is, what are we going to be learning about? Two incredible patterns are the same phase angle and conjunctions and oppositions in the composite chart. These are related to the transiting planets and natal planets. I'll explain all this shortly. And if you know about the composite chart, you may say, oh, big deal, he's just going to talk about the composite chart, using it in transits. Nothing new. I think I'll go to another channel, watch something else. Hold on. This you might see some things here that you didn't quite know about or never really thought very deeply about. And then there's a third pattern, which is midpoints, conjunct or opposition midpoints, which is very cool, not quite as amazing as the first two. Now, because these patterns are so amazing, they almost seem magical, and this idea of magical qualities is a term even scientists use sometimes. In the book The Road to Reality by the celebrated scientist Roger Penrose, he refers to some of the amazing mathematical properties as magical. I mean, not magical like really magic, but they're just mind-boggling. It's just incredible the way everything fits together in the universe. So it's like magic to our small, finite brains, I guess. So it's just amazing. You call it amazing, call it magical. Some people call these things sacred geometry, just because they're really amazing. Okay, so let's see what this is all about. All right. Well, I'm going to be talking about transits, and by transits in astrology, we mean where the planets are on a given day, say today, and then you relate it to where the planets were when you were born, and the relationship of where the planets were when you were born to where they are now. We call those transit to natal aspects, for example. You can look at the aspects between them, and that tells you what's going on today. So, for example, I have what we call a bi-wheel, and in the inner wheel here it tells me in the upper right corner here is the natal chart of Barack Obama. Now, I used Barack Obama's chart in another video, and someone commented that his birth certificate is forged. There's this whole debate about whether his birth certificate is real or not. So, if it's not, then okay, then we can still learn from it. And if it's an actual real birth certificate, then these would actually apply to his actual life. So in either case, whatever your political persuasion is, you can still learn equally well about the ideas. But that is a good point. A lot of people do believe that his birth certificate is not an actual valid one. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not a political expert. But I do know a whole bunch about astrology, and that's what I'm going to talk about. So anyway, now in the outer ring here, so in the inner ring, this is where the planets were when Barack Obama was born, and these are his house cusps. And in the outer ring are the planets, and tells me over here I circled in red, on March 7, 2013, specifically at 4:41 a.m. in Washington, D.C., and I've circled in red here. This is transiting Neptune. Neptune will be at 3 degrees 21 minutes of Pisces on that date, and Barack Obama's moon is at 3 degrees 21 minutes of Gemini, so it's exactly square. All right, so at that time in the morning of March 7, 2013, Neptune is exactly square the moon, and, we would interpret that and say, he could have some disillusionment in his home, he's feeling spacey, whatever. So, and then you can interpret the houses and the rulerships and all that stuff and get your interpretation. And that's what astrologers very often do. Okay, so far, so good, very simple. All I'm saying is that Neptune, transiting Neptune, is square his moon on this date, March 7, 2013, and I'm using the tropical zodiac. Now, what if I use the sidereal zodiac? You know, in India, they practice what we call Vedic astrology, and they use the sidereal zodiac, and some people in the Western world, in Europe and USA and so on, also use the sidereal zodiac, and the sidereal zodiac bases the zodiac signs against the actual stars in the sky. The tropical zodiac's a rather abstract thing in terms of astronomy. It's based on the seasons, and the seasons, geometrically or astronomically, what that boils down to is you take this circle called the ecliptic plane, another one called the equatorial plane, and you see where they intersect. It's an abstract point. In other words, there's nothing physical necessarily there, and that's the beginning of the zodiac. So anyway, what the zodiac is, this Aries, Taurus, Gemini business, as used in the West typically, is really a rather interesting and somewhat abstract thing. But that's what we use, and that's what these are based on. Now, what if I looked at the planets in relationship to the actual stars in the sky, rather than using the tropical zodiac, the zodiac that we use, as our reference? So what if we use the actual stars in the sky, which is different? You may not have known they're different, but they're different. There's a relationship between them. The tropical zodiac and the sidereal zodiac, a zodiac based on the stars, they change in relationship to each other. It's called precession of the equinoxes, and it's about 1 degree every 71 to 72 years. They separate from each other. So, in the sidereal zodiac, we get a different date. In the tropical zodiac, it's March 7, and here's the same exact thing in the I've circled sidereal. This is Barack Obama's sidereal chart, and here are the sidereal transits, and it happens on March 27th. So let me go back up again. What was that date? March 7 for the tropical. March 27, so 20 days later, about 3 weeks later, is when this aspect is exact, according to the sidereal zodiac. So the moon is at 10 Taurus 08 in his chart, and Neptune comes to 10 Aquarius 08. The square is exact at 7:34 in the afternoon on March 27, 2013. I'm doing this for Washington, D.C. for the transits location. Okay, so there's 3 weeks difference. So when does this aspect reach its full power? You know, it reaches its full power when it's exact. Most of us would say that's March 7. Some of us would say that's March 27. So that's interesting. Now, here's what I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you some planetary patterns. Instead of just straightforward aspects like transiting Neptune, square natal moon, I'm going to show you some patterns where it doesn't matter whether you use a tropical zodiac or a sidereal zodiac. In fact, it's so, you might say, permanent that it doesn't even matter if one chart was tropical and the other sidereal. So it doesn't depend on any of that. And because it does not depend on any of that, might, intuitively might give you the sense, well, holy moly, man, if it doesn't depend on that, it's like really there. It's not perspective dependent as much. And so there are these things that don't depend on whether you're doing tropical or sidereal. And in my personal experience, it's just personal experience, don't have any solid research to prove anything. And in the experience of a lot of other astrologers who've tried these things, these are really powerful. So that's kind of the magical quality, is that it doesn't depend on things like tropical or sidereal. And when I show you what it is, it's sort of like that makes sense. So let me show you. Here's another day. It happens to be December 13, 2015. And I've got, again, Barack Obama in the inner wheel. And I removed all the planets except Jupiter and Uranus so that It's very simple. Let me go back up and show you. See, it's Jupiter's at 0 Aquarius, 52 minutes. Uranus is 25 degrees Leo, and 16 minutes. If I go back up here, back to his chart, you'll see that that's the sidereal. Go back one more. In the tropical, there's that Jupiter at 0 Aquarius 52, and the Uranus at 25 Leo 16. So I've removed everything else so we don't get confused and overloaded. And there are just the transiting Jupiter and Uranus. So looking at this particular day, it doesn't look particularly exciting in terms of what's happening with Jupiter and Uranus using the usual kinds of aspects, and we would not detect it as an important day. But it ends up using these ideas of these patterns. It's an extremely important day, and I'll show you why. We go to the next slide, which is the same exact thing as the previous slide. I've just shown you the angular distances between the planets. And what's happening here is that this happens to be the day when the Jupiter-Uranus angle in the sky is the same as it was at birth. So it's a Jupiter-Uranus same phase angle. You could call it phase angle. The relationship of Jupiter-Uranus going all the way around from 0 to 360 is in the same exact relationship. So when President Obama was born, Jupiter happened to be 155 degrees and 35 minutes past Uranus. See that if we go counterclockwise, which is the order of the zodiac signs here. So we go around, there's Jupiter, 155 degrees, 35 minutes past Uranus. And on this particular day, December 13, 2015, here's Uranus in the sky on that day, the transiting position, and Jupiter, we move around, it's exactly the same distance. So we could call that a phase angle return, is what some people call it. And so what's going on in the sky, whether it's an aspect or not, they're the same angle. Now here's what's one thing that's really cool about this, is that when you have this phase angle return, you will always have two other things that are the same angle. You always get two, not just one. So what's happening is that the distance of transiting Jupiter to natal Jupiter is the same as transiting Uranus to natal Uranus. Happens to be 128 degrees, 39 minutes. So let me say that again. Whenever you have a phase angle return, which means that the same two planets, we look at the same two planets, and the angle is the same in the natal chart and in the transiting chart, and in the same phase, meaning Jupiter is 155, where am I? Jupiter is 155 past Uranus in the natal chart, and Jupiter is 155 degrees, same distance ahead of Uranus in the transiting chart. So whenever you get that phase angle return, always what happens is the transiting same planets will have the same angle. Transiting Jupiter to natal Jupiter and transiting Uranus to natal Uranus will have the same angle. So you get a double resonance. Whenever you get a single resonance, I'm calling it resonance, same, you can imagine these like strings, like cosmic strings, boing, and get this note. You're getting two of them. You get two for the price of one. You can never get one resonance. You always get a double resonance. One weekend years ago, I spent 2 days going through and proving this stuff logically, that this is in fact absolutely true. And so that's what happens. So that's kind of magical. Whenever you get this resonance, you get a double resonance. So this should be a huge Jupiter-Uranus day, and I'm sure it will be. So mid-December 2015, he will be very enthusiastic, very upbeat, and with that enthusiasm, he could get a lot done. Give very inspiring talks and impress people and get them motivated and so on. It's a great energy, Jupiter-Uranus. So there it is. This, I would say, I believe, is extremely important, and these are the kinds of things you want to find. That may or may not be true. Everybody has their own opinion. That just happens to be my opinion. But in any case, the geometry is fascinating, that when you get this phase angle return, You get two things the same. Now, why do I call this magical, or you call it sacred geometry? Because it gets even more amazing. The next amazing thing that I gave you a hint about is I could change this to sidereal. I could even change just one of them to sidereal, which doesn't really make any sense, and it would stay there. The reason it stays there is because I'm looking at the distance between the transiting planets. The phase angle return doesn't matter what zodiac I use, and the double resonance will be there. And I'll show you an example of that. Same exact chart, only now I've left the natal chart as tropical. The natal Jupiter is still 0 Aquarius. The natal Uranus is still 25 Leo. But I made the transiting sidereal, and I've circled it here. Sidereal, the outer ring, is the transit, same date and time. But it's sidereal, natal is tropical. So I've written up here at the top, Jupiter-Uranus, same phase angle. The resonances, in other words, the same angular distances, are still there, even though one chart is tropical and one is sidereal. So you get a double resonance, and it doesn't matter what zodiac or what reference you use. You could make up new zodiacs. It's zodiac independent. You get these double resonances. So they're very powerful. They're, you might say, stable, no matter the perspective you use. And I've been using them for years, and I can't live without them. I mean, this is what if I do a forecast for somebody, these are the kinds of things that I look at primarily. These are the most important. And so now the angles have changed. The natal Jupiter-Uranus, of course, is still 155, and the transiting is still 155 degrees. But the Jupiter to Jupiter, the transiting Jupiter to natal Jupiter, and the transiting Uranus to natal Uranus, that angle has changed, but they're still the same, 152 degrees, 38 minutes. So that's it. That's sort of the magical thing. Maybe it's not that magical to you, but I think it's pretty cool, and it's worth being aware of. So there you go, same phase angle. Now, there's another thing another pattern, I mentioned there are two patterns, that does the same thing, where you get the same resonance, and all it is instead of having the same phase angle, if the phase angle is opposite. So instead of Jupiter being 155 degrees 35 minutes ahead of Uranus, we'll have it behind Uranus. So when Jupiter's 155 degrees, on this other side of Uranus, so the phase is different, that has the same properties of double resonances, and is very important. In fact, I believe it's even more important. But in any case, they're both extremely important. Let's go and take a look at that. Here's an example of what I'm talking about, and it happens to be January 14th, 2018. So in the middle of January, I ran the chart for 4:50 a.m. in Washington, D.C. I ran Sirius on that particular day, and it tells me the exact time, and then I enter this as a biwheel. I enter the data, and I call it up. And so here's what's happening. Here's President Obama's Jupiter and Uranus, still, his Jupiter 0 Aquarius, Uranus at 25 Leo. That's his natal chart, still the same, tropical zodiac. And if I look at the transits, I'm just doing it all tropical. On that particular day, transiting Jupiter is 19 Scorpio 03, and Uranus is 25 Aries 38. If I can read that, this is very small on this reduced window here. It's much bigger in the actual program. Exactly at that time, what happens is the composite chart, and many of you know what the composite chart is. I take the natal Jupiter and the transiting Jupiter, I take the midpoint of them, and I take the natal Uranus and the transiting Uranus, and I'm drawing arrows showing I'm going halfway in between. That's called the composite Uranus. So in this outer ring, I've circled it in red here. I've got the composite chart of the transiting natal, and there's the exact opposition. Jupiter 24 Sag 57, Uranus 24 Gemini 57, exact to the minute. On the morning of January 14th, there's a composite Jupiter-Uranus. Now, the composite conjunctions and oppositions, in this case it's an opposition, have the same properties as the phase angle, and I'll show you that in the next slide. all I did is show the angles. See that? The same exact slide, I just filled this in. So let me go back up to the previous slide. All I'm going to do is show you the angular distances. I didn't want to overwhelm you with the first slide. So now I'm showing you the distances, and there they are. Let's look at this green one. This says that transiting Jupiter, because I'm in the middle ring is transit and the inner ring is natal, transiting Jupiter to natal Uranus is the same distance as transiting Uranus to natal Jupiter. In other words, it's the same distance but different phase angle. Okay? Well, I'm not even thinking about phase angle. Let's just say that they're the same. And then the other thing that goes on is that, this is where I want to talk about phase angle, is the natal Jupiter-Uranus angle is 155 degrees 35 minutes. And the transit, this is the second ring, and I'm going to the second ring again, the transiting Jupiter-Uranus is also 155 degrees 35 minutes. But notice, in the transit, if I go counterclockwise, Uranus is ahead of Jupiter, and in the natal, Jupiter's ahead of Uranus. These are almost oppositions. It's a little hard to tell, but if I go from Uranus to Jupiter, it's before the opposition. So the 155 degrees goes this way, and for the transit it goes from Jupiter to Uranus, and natal goes Uranus to Jupiter. So same angle, opposite phase, always produces a conjunction or opposition in the composite chart. Let me say that again. If there's a conjunction or opposition in the composite chart, as there is here, I'm doing a composite of the transits and the natal. Why not? You do composite of two people. Why not do a composite of the transit and natal? Whenever there's a conjunction or opposition, it means those two planets, Jupiter and Uranus, are in the same angular distance in the charts, except they're in different phases. And there's a, you might say, a double whammy. The Uranus, natal Uranus distance to the transiting Jupiter and the natal Jupiter to the transiting Uranus have the same exact angular distance. You get this double resonance. It's huge. So this is one of the things that hasn't been noticed in the composite chart. The conjunctions and oppositions have this huge resonance going on that creates this symmetry. So there's these beautiful geometric things going on that create these symmetrical patterns and these huge resonances, and I think they've, haven't been talked about a lot. And I think it's interesting. And also, I'll show you in the next slide, I did the same thing where I've got the natal tropical, and I made the transit sidereal, which probably doesn't make any sense, but just to show you, you can do any kind of wacky thing you want, and the angular distances are still the same. We still have the 155-35 in the transit and in the natal, and the angle now is 59 degrees 46 minutes, is the same of the transiting Jupiter to natal Uranus and transiting Uranus to natal Jupiter. There's so much going on, you might get sort of dyslexic and confused just thinking about all this. But all I'm really saying is these two pairs of planets end up being the same. There's this beautiful symmetry. It's interesting, astrologers say there's no coincidences. Well, there's no coincidence. This probably means something. And from my personal experience, wow, does it mean something. In fact, these are the tools we're using in our quantitative research that we think we can actually get measurable behaviors, how powerful these things are. We'll see if we can achieve that. So anyway, we have two magical patterns. Same phase angle and opposite phase angle, but you can call the opposite phase angle, it'll end up being an opposition, as it is in this case, or a conjunction in the composite chart. And that's why if we go back to the very first slide, I'm going backwards. Here's the two magical patterns, same phase angle and a conjunction or an opposition in the composite chart. I haven't proven to you that it's always a conjunction or opposition, but you can just take my word for it. Okay, so, whoops, sorry, hit the wrong key, made a big noise there. Okay, so now I'll go back to where I was. Where was I? Here. Next slide, showing the angles are the same, and then even changing the zodiac of one of them, we still have that double resonance. Two sets of angles are the same. And I mentioned that at the bottom of the slide here. And this happened to happen on January 14th, 2018. The opposition in the composite chart of the transits and natal happen, and that's another huge day. And there's, in the composite, well, I don't know how much, if I have enough time to explain all this, but they're very similar and they're very powerful. I could go into more subtlety. There's slight differences in the way you interpret. And then a third situation is this one. This is the one that's not quite as powerful, but you do get a double resonance only if you stay in the same zodiac. That's why it's not quite as powerful. It falls apart if you put one in sidereal and one in tropical. But it does have a double resonance if you use the same zodiac. And here's a day when that happens, April 24, 2013. I did it at 7:45 in the morning, Washington, D.C. It's exact. And I'll show you what happens. Again, it doesn't look that exciting. Here's transiting Jupiter and Uranus. Here's natal Jupiter and Uranus. Who cares? But what's actually happening is we're getting some same angles again. And in this case, it's natal Jupiter to transiting Jupiter is the same as natal Uranus to transiting Uranus. And what is this? Natal Uranus to transiting Jupiter is the same as natal Jupiter to transiting Uranus. There are three patterns which are extremely similar. And they're the only three. I've worked it out mathematically, and there are only three. And those three patterns are the same phase angle, right? The conjunction or opposition in the composite chart. Those are the two most powerful. And the third one is a midpoint conjunct or opposition of midpoint. In this case, the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint in the natal chart is conjunct the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint in the transiting chart. It doesn't matter what's conjunct or opposition. You'll get these resonances. And that's what's happening here. So there are three patterns: midpoint, conjunct, or opposition. Midpoint is the least powerful of the three, but still, I think, more important than the normal aspects we use, like the transiting Neptune square natal moon. And the composite and the same phase angle are incredible. Okay, well, that's the end of my little slideshow there. Now I'll show you how you would pull that up in the software. So I'm using Series 1.3. I'm going to click on Continue with Previous Session. Here's the chart of Barack Obama. And I have a timeline format. And this is the timeline format. If I right-click, I see what I've selected here. Transit to natal starting November 1st, 2015 for 3 months. I'm doing only outer planet transits. And I've included the midpoints, composite, midpoint, same angle. There it is. There it is. So you can select those big three things. I'll click Cancel, and you'll see it right here. Jupiter-Uranus. Do you see my cursor here? Jupiter-Uranus equals Jupiter-Uranus. It's so small on this reduced screen, you may have trouble seeing it, on December 13, which if I go back to the slideshow, that's what it showed you. I could also, to make it easier to find these things, I'll right-click, I'll go to Customize, and I'll remove all these aspects: sesquiquadrat, semi-square, semi-sextile, quincunx, trine, sextile, square. I'll just leave the conjunctions and oppositions for the aspects. That's not so noisy. Now I'm just seeing midpoint to midpoint. I'm also seeing midpoint structures, like transiting Jupiter, conjunct Mercury, Neptune. I can get rid of those. I'll right-click, go to Customize, go over here to the midpoints declination. No, I don't want transiting planet to natal midpoint. I don't want transiting midpoint to natal planet. I still want my midpoint. I want my composite chart. I want my same angle. Very good. Thank you. Saved. Thank you. So basically I'm just right-clicking, going into the customizing, finding where those settings are, because you can always, we have some default settings here that are easy, but then you can further refine them. Now I have a nice short list of just my big stuff. All I've got now are my midpoint to midpoint, like Jupiter-Pluto midpoint is conjunct Jupiter-Pluto midpoint on December 26th, 2015 is what it tells me here. Jupiter-Uranus midpoint equals Jupiter-Uranus midpoint, December 13. So basically, late December 2015 into early January, this time period in here, is hugely powerful and successful for President Obama, assuming that his birth chart that is, birth certificate is a valid birth certificate. Anytime Uranus Pluto coming up in January gets kind of more explosive then. So these, I believe, personally, are the huge things that get completely missed. Now, if I go back to my slide here, let's see, let's go all the way to the top, and start going down. That was my Neptune transits. This is the same phase angle. What was the date here? December 13, 2015. So that's this one. That's the same phase angle. There it is, December 13. And the next thing I had was the composite chart, and that's shown here on January 2018. So I'm going to right-click. Actually, I could just change the date right there, but anyway, I'll right-click, and what is that date again? January 2018. So I'll start a month earlier, December 1st, 2017. I'll run it for 3 months. Okay. And there it is, Jupiter opposite Uranus in the composite chart on January 14th. I could extend this for 6 months. Well, not a whole lot of these things happen. Let's run it for an entire year. I've got also conjunctions and oppositions in here, but I made that list very short. So there it is, very nice. You can pick these things out. And the midpoint that we saw, just to show you, going back to my PowerPoint, what was the date of that? That was the midpoint in April 2013. I can actually just change the date here. April, I'll start in March 2018, the month before, just no particular reason. And so there it is, the April 4th, oh, that's the composite. What did I do here? Did I get that right? April 2013. Oh, 2013. Let me just change it here. 2013, not 18. Click OK. And there's the midpoint to midpoint, April 24th, which is the date. So it picks it up. There's also a Saturn-Uranus in the composite in October, early October, 2013, and also mid-April. Those are, actually I mentioned those in another video. This is a disturbing influence, Saturn-Uranus. So there you go. You can, include all the other aspects, whatever you want, but this is one of the reasons why we've included this feature in Sirius. Because as people become accustomed to what's going on with these resonances and how they work, and people have used the composite chart in compatibility, it works in forecasting, especially conjunctions and oppositions. So anyway, some interesting theory and some reasons why this is in the program, because we're sure more and more people are going to start using this because you find that it works. Okay, I've talked very fast. I try to keep these demonstration videos to about a half hour. I'm getting on 34 minutes here, so I'm about at my time I like to stop. So that's it. I hope you followed that. If it was a little heavy, you could watch this again, of course. But it's really very simple. Whenever there's planetary distances are the same, you'll get two things that are the same, and I believe it creates this huge resonance because you get a double. Two pairs of planets have the same angle. So it's very cool that you can just pop them in there, see them very visually, see them very easily. So that's that. I've been covering some specialized topics. Another recent video I did was on primary directions, totally different thing in medieval astrology. So I'll cover different specialized topics and how they're used and how you get to them in the program and why they're important, why people are excited about them. Like with primary directions, you could see that brilliant people like Kepler and Cardan were working with them and coming up with their own ideas about them, and they were used for way over 1,000 years. And now, from a more modern approach, looking at the geometry of things, we see these kinds of things. So many exciting areas of development and work. This is an area that I have expertise in, as opposed to primary directions, where other people have much greater expertise than I do. But I use this stuff every day. I can't live without it. It's just unbelievably powerful. And if I couldn't get it, I wouldn't be able to forecast. So interesting information. I hope you found that interesting. Maybe you want to experiment with it if you haven't. Look at it in your own chart and see what's going on. See if it works. See if those days are good. We can see for President Obama, assuming his birth certificate is valid, if, for example, late April is an enthusiastic time, and if mid-April, there's some overlap here in these two, and then late September to mid-October, peaking in early October, if those are Saturn-Uranus times of tension and transition and trying to change things, but struggling to make those critical changes. Okay, so hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to sign off here, and I'll continue making more videos on interesting ideas in astrology, interesting features of Sirius. This one spend a lot of time talking about the ideas. Sometimes it's more of a show and tell of how you can do things. There's so many things I want to show. I've got, right off the top of my head, 20 or 30 videos I could make. But I've got other things I got to do too. Okay, thank you very much for watching this and listening. God bless. Namaste. Take care.